Good morning, and welcome to the Think and Grow Rich show. My name is Galen Bingham. I am the leadership strategist, and I am so excited to be with you for not only for this show, but for this chapter and for this guest. This is going to be incredible. I'm going to stall for a little bit just to give you time to make sure that you've got people around you that need to hear this conversation. We're going to be talking about imagination. And this is a chapter that really cuts to and ignites the rest of the system, the rest of the philosophy. And I'm just really, really encouraged that we get to come to you every week to share with you insights from this incredible book. As you may know, we talk about the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, written in 1937. And each week we bring in a guest to share how they have activated this philosophy and how they leverage this not only in their business, but also in their life. And today's show is going to be one of the absolute best. Our guest today is going to be Mr. Jeffrey Hayzlett. And Jeffrey Hayzlett is he's done a little bit of everything. He is the chairman of the C-Suite Network. That is the home where all business executives, regardless of your place, if you are in the C-suite aspiring to get to the C-suite, you're probably connected to either his network, his podcast, his books. He is a Hall of Fame speaker, incredible person and executive. So definitely you want to be a part of this show and have your friends be a part of this as well. I could go on, and I typically do. So I've got to bring in my co-host, because if not, this will turn into a Galen Bingham conversation very, very easily. So that I can stay on the good list and instead of slipping to the naughty list, I'm going to bring in Dr. Peter James. Dr. Peter James, come on in. Save me from this being my one-on-one show. What are your thoughts?
This is not the Galen Bingham show. So it's good morning there, Galen. Good to see you. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here as we dive into Think and Grow Rich with a phenomenal guest this week. Let me start this conversation off with this statement from the book, this sentence. The only limitation is that which one sets up in one's own mind. Say that again. The only limitation is that which one sets up in one's own mind. So again, I got to ask you, we've done this before. What is the block? Where are you telling yourself you can only go so far with? Because that's your limitation. And why not go even further? What's getting in the way? So that's the type of stuff we're talking about today with imagination there, Galen. We've already got people chiming in on YouTube TV, on Facebook Live. Galen, this is going to be rich. My name is Dr. Peter A. James, and let's rock and roll.
All right. Yeah, this is going to be a great show for sure. And like you said, Dr. Peter, imagination is incredibly important. One of my favorite parts of this chapter is where Napoleon Hill says that man's only limitation within reason lies in his development and use of imagination. And at best, man only has discovered that he has an imagination, not necessarily how to use it fully. So this conversation and our guest in particular is really going to help us shed light on how he uses his imagination to do some of the amazing things that he's done. Speaking of amazing people that have done some amazing things, I've got to bring in my other co-host, Ms. Ann McNeil, our fearless leader, the only person I think of that can get me up at this early of a morning on a Saturday morning. Come on into the conversation and share your thoughts about imagination.
Absolutely, Galen. First, let me share my thoughts about our guests and the power of imagination. And I think that today, our guest, first of all, I'm sorry, my name, yes, is Ann McNeil, and I am the master builder, helping to build stronger and better lives and businesses using this MasterMind philosophy and this concept. And our guest today, I believe, is an excellent example of the principle of imagination. And one of my aha moments from reading the book in this particular chapter, and I just like to take a moment and share Napoleon Hill's words, he said that everything starts with an idea. And when you mix your idea with the power of imagination, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things can happen. But in this chapter toward the end, he shares a story about the power of radio. And what I'd like to set us up with today is the fact that our guest today is an example of what Napoleon Hill says in his chapter when he talks about the fact that radio will become those individuals who can tap into the imagination of the power of radio. Let's call it podcast, whatever you want to call it, will become the new millionaires of the future. And so our special guest today, Mr. Jeffrey Hayzlett, I believe is a great example of that. So like Dr. Peter, I'm excited to get the program started.
Well, fantastic. Well, hey, before we bring in our guest, I just want to talk to you a little bit about his bio because, you know, we all know him to some degree, but I'll tell you, when I got his full bio, I was even more impressed. He's chairman and CEO of the C-Suite Network, which I said earlier is really where all key executives go for their information, for their insights. But he's also a book author. So he's authored books such as Think Big and Act Bigger, The Rewards of Being Relentless, Running the Gauntlet, The Mirror Test, The Hero Factor. He's a former Fortune 100 CMO working for some of the biggest brands on the planet. He has been featured in Success Magazine. He has been featured all over the world. He's traveled. He's a speaker. He's actually doing this thing for real. So with that, I would love to bring in Mr. Jeffrey Hayzlett. Welcome to the show. We are looking forward to this conversation. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks, Anne, for all that she's done to help build this community. And also yourself, Galen, and Dr. James. Dr. James, what great comments about imagination. You know, people would think now, if you put that in more current terms about thinking outside the box, and certainly Napoleon Hill did that. I don't know how many of you actually have a copy of the book with you pretty much on your desk all the time, but this is it. My favorite chapters are marked and everything else. And it's just exciting to be with each of you. It's so early in the morning. I almost wanted to stay up all night long just so I could just be here with you today and to be able to share with you. You know, I just got through contributing to a chapter in a new book called Dear Napoleon, which is out in August of the 2021, and all about what did Napoleon Hill mean to me. There's a few books that I read every single year. Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends, and How to Win Friends, and then also Og Mandino's book, The Salesman, and then All the Time. And the only book that sits right here on my desk, and the one that I actually give a copy to every new council member, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, Galen, but council members, where we bring them in and I say, everyone has to read chapter 10, but you also want to look at, hey, the chapter on desire, the chapter on faith, the chapter on imagination, the chapter on, organizing and planning. And then of course, I think the best chapter of the world in the book is chapter 10. And it's the one in which I make copies of and hand out to people all the time, send out digitally. Again, when you mentioned the C-Suite Network, and we started with the concept in mind about creating a very large trusted organization where people could use their content, their products, their services in order to grow their business, grow their knowledge, grow their reach, their influence, and of course, grow their businesses, because that's what it's about. The C-Suite Network, we are nothing but a large, large collection of masterminds. And we don't always refer to them as masterminds because in business, people don't always understand that. And we're doing our best to educate them, but we call them councils or peer-to-peer councils. And for us, it's all about, that relevancy. It's all about increasing our reach. And it's about, of course, reciprocity. What can I do for you? And then you do for me. And the biggest thing that we do at the C-Suite Network is we bring people together in order to give. because the more you give, the more you get. And every single day we have our mastermind sessions, our council sessions. I had one yesterday with our Thought Council, which is the most elite group of thought leaders in the world who get together and we help each other, again, grow our knowledge, grow our reach, our relevancy, and certainly our lives, because that's what it's about. And we work on, and I'm going to look at the mastermind from the philosophy of how do you use it, and how do you use it for greater reach of yourself in positioning, because that's what I do. Listen, Galen, you mentioned in my bio some of the things I do, but I bought and sold over 250 businesses in my career, over $25 billion in transaction. My last business, one of my colleagues likes to say, my budget for marketing was $17 billion. So, in a company that was doing about 185 billion, I sit on 14 corporate boards today. 4 of those are publicly traded companies. And I'm in 5 business Hall of Fames. And you mentioned the Speaking Hall of Fame, the Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame, the Direct Marketing Hall of Fame, the Business Hall of Fame, and the Printing Hall of Fame. I'm an old printer. So we focus on how to take people through what I call the thought monetization model. And that is to be able to say, okay, I've got this great IP. I got this great idea. I've got a book. I've got a blog. I've got a speech. I've got all these things. But how do I scale that? How do I move that to something else? And so we spend a great deal of time in that, because a mastermind is a widely created process for us to be able to, again, think and grow rich, to be able to use the power of our imagination, the power of our mind, and the power of our collective, the people around us, in order to grow rich. And grow rich doesn't just about mean money in your pocket. It also means what's up here and what's right here, because that's our IP. Our IP that each of us have is in our head and the things that we come up with, but it's also those things that are in our heart. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind. So it's not just about making money in terms of growing rich that way, but growing rich in our lives, because we position or reposition in the C-Suite network a way to reposition the mastermind as a peer-to-peer network to create strategic advantage for business and for professional growth. And so we focus both on the individual. And by the way, that's what's so interesting is I get some of the most high-powered CEOs, high-powered CMOs who pay, $75,000, $100,000 to be a part of some of the groups. Now, not all of our groups are like that, so don't think like that. Think like $100 a month, for a lot of the groups. So, but it's an opportunity for them. And we find that we spend more time on what's in here than what's in here. And because of the way in which we've gone through different trials and tribulations in our lives that affect the things in the way that we do. And they, as Dr. James said earlier, it limits us to our mind. It limits us to, we can't do that. I can't do that. I'm not worthy. And all of the things around it, we have to sometimes say, well, you are. And it was yesterday, one of our members, I had to say, I said, I got to stop right now, because here we were in all these squares. And I had to say, what I saw from her 6 months ago and what I see from her today, it's almost as though like the lights were on. You know what I'm talking about? When you look at someone and before everything around them was kind of dark, and whenever you'd see them, it was just kind of a downer. And all of a sudden, boom, she shone because she had made and started to make that transformation and going out beyond her mind of what she was or what she could be. So when we look at masterminds, and I know we're going to get into this conversation with everyone here in the Q&A and everything else, but we look to help people with the thought side of being able to establish or leveraging their IP, expanded thought leadership positioning, category ownership, which I think is critical, content platforms and forums to be able to do it, and then how to look at client and prospect value and relevancy. At the same time, we look at how you monetize this. I'm a business person. I'm the kind of person that, is a workaholic and who went to my wife said, you're working too hard. You're going to get this thing fixed. And if you don't get this thing fixed, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. And so I went to one of those, week-long immersive sessions for alcoholics, addicts of all kinds, drug addicts, sex addicts, and of course, work addicts, and I'm the kind of person that sits in the back of the room counting up the number of people, how much is the workbook, how much are we paying everybody, how much are the meals, how much hotel, thinking, hey, this is a good kind of business. So that's the kind of person I tend to be. So I'm always looking at what is the monetization of that. So I also help people, we help people in our group being able to help them increase their revenue creation, new revenue opportunities, how to drive coaching and training and board services and licenses and serving on boards and lead generation and diversity of their income and everything else. And so we work on what does that look like and how to establish them, how to run them. So not only am I a believer in what they can do, but how they can do it. And so I can't wait to talk to more of you about that and my experiences with masterminds. And I am so excited, to be here with Ann, especially because this is, I think, the first time we've ever shared the stage, so to speak. And I'm a huge believer and follower of her. In fact, when I said, I'm going to go out and create this mastermind group, I went out and bought her book. Now, I can't even show you her book because I've torn out the pages so much to write notes on it and attach more notes. There it is right there. It's a beautiful thing. And I've got the workbook. If you're going to get the book, you better get the workbook too, because I'm telling you, I swear, I'm one of those people where I get the pages and I tear them out and then I write all over them and then I staple more pages so I can keep going. I kind of create my own book. And so, Ann, I got to get another one. I'm going to have to go buy another one. All right, I'll do that. Thanks, Galen.
Hey, yeah. So you've jumped.
And by the way, I have to apologize. When you guys put me on like this, it's like putting a quarter in. You put the quarter in and you get to go for the full ride here. And that's usually what even if it's the butt crack of the morning, which it is for me. Okay, I'm not a morning. My staff knows. What do you mean you got Jeff on a morning program? They don't even talk to me in the morning. Okay, so thank you.
Yeah, so you've jumped in. I mean, that's exactly what we're wanting to get into. And I've got a question for you that I would just love your insight on, because knowing a little bit about your background and that both of us have kind of come from a corporate foundation, and then we moved into what we're doing now. One of the things that I'm taken by in this text is when Napoleon Hill talks about the different kinds of imagination. He talks about synthetic imagination and creative imagination. And I'm going to tell you that a lot of my professional career, I've used synthetic imagination, where you borrow from what's been created, you package, part of this with the part of that, and you mix it in the goulash and it comes out something different. And then I've also had some experiences with creative imagination where I don't know where that idea came from, but oh my God, let's put some legs underneath it. I would just love to hear from you, your experience with both kinds of imagination, both synthetic imagination, which sounds like you got access to a lot of folks that can help you with that, as well as that creative imagination where God just opens up the heavens and gives you this idea, and it just makes a whole lot of sense.
Well, I'm one of those creative ones for myself, but let me tell you what, I love synthetic. What do I mean by that? It's called OPM, other people's money and other people's experiences. And I love the ability to be able to take all of that and that collective and be able to add to it. But what most people find in the synthetic side is that they're always limited because they've only seen what they've seen rather than see the other things. And it's important for us to go through our lives to understand that we don't know what we don't know. Most C-suite executives think that their job is to be the most or the smartest person in the room. That's not their job. Their job is to be the most strategic person in the room. So when we start to understand what our problem that we're solving, or what is it we're supposed to do and how is it we're supposed to do it, rather than play the role, then we can start to use the power of that collective. We can start to use that synthetic leadership of being able to say, well, have you thought of this? And are you aware of what you're not aware of? Or then you also want to have those great minds around them that just do. They have those ideas, and we all know who they are, because you go like, where the hell did that come from? Right? So that which is fantastic. Ann mentioned earlier the power of radio. Well, that was the technology, the burgeoning technology at the time. And of course, you got to remember the electricity was just starting to move itself across the United States during that same time period. And that was the time in which people would come together to listen to the radio. Remember, you'd see those old timey pictures of people who would gather in the family and they'd turn that radio and they'd listen to the Saturday radio show or whatever it might be, or the president's address in the morning on Saturday mornings or whatever. Now, today, that is now podcasting. We realized that using content is the new way to express ourselves and get our scale out there to other people. And whether that be through television, which we do as well, we have C-Suite TV, whether it be through a book like our book club, or whether it be through podcasts. Today, we have over 400 podcasts out there. Well, I didn't come up with podcasting, but I saw that people were doing it, and I saw the power of being able to get inside of people's ears, because that's a very auditory thing, and it's easier to do that than, say, for this video medium where you need extra equipment, you need extra things, you might need a studio, you can't always do it. Not everybody looks good on television, and that's just the way it works. And so, but we can be great at what we say and how we say it. And so podcast is going to explore. There's over 2 million podcasts today. We're not even close to what we will see. It will be multitudes of that as we go, but it allows each one of us to become an expert and each one of us to share a message and create that community, which is real important.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, man, you're speaking my language. And if I'm not careful, we can make this a one-on-one conversation easy. But I got to bring in.
Ann won't let you do that. Ann won't let you do that. I know her. There's no way. That's not going to happen.
I've got to bring in Dr. Peter, and Dr. Peter, come on into the conversation. And I'd love for you to share the fact that this sits inside of an entire philosophy. I mean, we're talking about imagination, and we've got the perfect guest for that. But this sits inside of an entire philosophy. Talk a little bit about that philosophy, and then join the conversation as well.
Yeah, it's such great, rich conversations. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for even leading off into the entire book, all the chapters, all the principles that we hold near and dear to ourselves. I'd be remiss if I did not mention all the people who are jumping in on our chat. I see Johnny Lloyd on Facebook Live. Tashana, we see you. Laverne, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please make sure you share your questions or your comments as needed. We see you on these platforms for sure. But back to the book. I love the fact that Jeffrey has mentioned already some of these principles, these chapters for sure. The chapter 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. Look, you put sex in front of anything, it just messes up your words altogether. But then he also dove into the power of the mastermind. And it sounds like he's really taken hold of that chapter and just run with it overall. Excited to hear more about that. And I'm dying to ask some questions around that. But as we go back to this entire framework, this Think and Grow Rich, that many people get deterred because they hear the word rich in the title. But what about the think and grow side of it that Jeffrey even mentioned that works on your head and your heart? So let's take a look at this from the breadth perspective of it by taking a look at this video coming up here.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the MasterMind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of Step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
Good stuff. The entire text in about 3 minutes right there, which is kind of awesome. And all these principles are so rich for all of us. Jeffrey, I want to bring you back into the conversation. I got tons of questions for you. Forget about Galen. He's not even part of this anymore. It's me and you, big guy. In chapter 5, Imagination, of course, Napoleon Hill starts out by saying, it has been said that anything can be created, which a human being can imagine. So I want to take you back a few years, to when it was before all of this, before your primetime shows, before the podcast. Were you able to dream all of this up? And what did that process look like from the dream to the execution, even to now where you are? Take us into that a little bit, if you could.
You know, a lot of people like to ask you all the time, what was your big goal? What was your plan for all this? Let me be very clear. I'm flying this plane as I'm building it, Nice. Yeah. And I'm building it as I'm flying it. It's probably not going to change much. Did I have some thought around, hey, let's go do this? Here's the basic value and what I would like to see happen in terms of, coming together and building a community of C-suite leaders. In fact, let me just tell everybody right now, the night before I named it the C-suite network, it was called the CEO network, until we all talked about, look, Jeff, you've got this great show on Bloomberg television. That's the #1 business show out there. And it's all around the C-suite. Why are we limiting ourselves just to one officer when we could go after every officer, every VP, GM, founder, everyone that's inside the company. And I went, wow, what a great idea. So we went online right there on the spot and we registered C-Suite Network rather than CEO Network. Go figure. And then we told the art department, our art agency, and said, can you take out the word CEO and replace it with C-Suite? Yeah, that's what we did. We changed the press release, boom, we're off. With no more thought than that. Now, because what you have to, I think, getting back to what you originally said, Dr. James, around don't let your mind limit you, right? But we were doing that. And then by opening it up, it gave us greater possibilities. So I'm constantly driven by the values of what we're trying to create, the vision of what we're trying to create. Now that vision changes, meaning we came together and what we had is a vision 6-7 years ago compared to the vision that we have today. And as I told you earlier, it's about bringing together a trusted community, and that we serve them by helping them grow through their content, their products, their services, to be able to focus in on that growth around their revenue, their relevancy, their reach, their knowledge, and of course, their lives, because you have to impact everyone's lives. But that is driven by our value of what we're trying to do, and that's bring great people together of a certain type. Quite frankly, let's be clear, we only want people who are VPs or higher. Now, why? Because that's the folks that are executives inside of a company. So we want serious business people. We found out that when we put people together and we bring those trusted executives together, great things happen. But, I don't think anyone, if it comes together with, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it. I think you have a general idea of where you're going to go, but you don't know, you can't. It'd drive you crazy if you had to plan out every single aspect. But think about like taking a trip across the country. You're going to go on vacation. You just want to go. You just want to go to Miami. You don't always. And then you have an idea. Maybe I like to stay in this hotel. Well, maybe this hotel. And then I'd like to go to dinner over here, or this kind of food, or this kind of food. But if you tried to plan out every single aspect of what you want to do, you'll limit yourself in what gets accomplished, and it will drive you freaking nuts on top of it.
Love that. I love that last part there, and then I'll slowly bring back Galen in because I know he wants to ask more questions too. But I love how you said planning is good, but leaving room for growth. And I think sometimes we overthink things, we overplan things too much, and maybe we're confining ourselves to a certain extent. So thank you so much for even bringing that even to my mind, for that matter as well.
Let me add with this, but it's okay to make mistakes through these processes. Yeah. You're going to fail. People ask me all the time in almost every interview, Jeff, what's your biggest failure? I say, I don't know. I haven't done it yet, which means I got a bigger one out there. Listen, nice. By and large, most of the things that we're doing in our lives, 99% of the things that we do, if you make a mistake, no one's going to die, right? No one's going to die. So, and by the way, in sharing that and being transparent about it with people who you trust, and that's what the real power of a mastermind is about. It doesn't hurt you. It helps you. And I think that's important for all of us to be able to think that we're going to go through this process. You're going to do these things. You're going to be vulnerable. I have given a great example yesterday of our thought council, or I could go our CMO council, or I could go any of our councils where we have some very high profile, very big executives, some of the best in the business in the world. And we're about to put them in a hot seat. And their hands are moist. They're sweating. They're worried. And these are the people who are the top of their field. I mean, they're the best of the best of the best. And they're scared about getting in a hot seat because we all are vulnerable. We all have to open up. But once you go through that, it's like you come out on the other side. When you watch them when they go in, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to tell these secrets. I got to tell the truth. I got to let people do. And they have to prepare for it, by the way, as well. And then, but when they're done with it, it's like, I always ask the question at the end of the hot seats, are you satisfied? And the reason I ask people that is I want to make sure that they got what they wanted to get, because if they come back later and said I didn't, then I said, whoa, 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 whoa. So are you satisfied? And almost everyone starts crying, or everyone starts giving this elation. And we're talking about very high profile business people because of the things that they got, the gives that they got, because now they got this collective give of like 20, 30 people, or maybe more. And they're all giving and giving and giving. And by the way, they're not giving advice, they're giving counsel. And what's the difference between advice and counsel? Counsel is from people who've been there before. Advice is from people who haven't been there. And so what we ask people to do is give counsel. By giving counsel, that's from people who say, here's what happened to me. This is what worked for me. This is the experience I had, as opposed to, hey, you should do this. You must do this. And we refrain from that. And we, of course, frame all of our mastermind conversations around that counsel.
I'll tell you, one of the things I'd love to hear you lean into, and then I'll bring in Ms. Ann. But I'm really passionate about this quote from Miles Davis, where he says, in order to be an effective jazz musician, you have to learn everything you can and then forget everything you've learned and just show up. And you have really seemed to master this confidence to lean into your intuition. And I know that that's tapping into some other principles within Think and Grow Rich, but I'm really picking up on this confidence that you have to lean into these crazy ideas, these inspired ideas, and go with it. Where does that come from, and how do you leverage that?
Well, they come from, that's a great question. And no one's ever asked that before, but I appreciate that. To me, it's like your own personal conditions of satisfaction, Galen. What is it that drives you, or that you want? And so I framed what I call conditions of satisfaction. And then of course around me, I know that Tricia Ben is here in the audience today, and she's one of my partners in chief. She's the chief community officer in charge of all the masterminds, all the groups that we have inside of the C-suite network, and pretty much everything else. And I talk about with her mutual conditions of satisfaction. So I not only do I have conditions of satisfaction for myself, but I want to have mutual conditions of satisfaction with the others that I work with or around, so that we can kind of understand, and I know what the game rules are. But it's really around those conditions of satisfaction. I have three simple ones. I have one, I want to build wealth for me and my family. Listen, I grew up in a very poor environment, didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of things, couldn't go on vacations. We had to watch our pennies. My mom used to make chili and she'd add rice to it so it'd stretch it, things like that. And I remember those things. And so I want to make sure that I have the money to do the things that I want to do. And I want my family to come into the future having the more abilities to do the things than I had to. The second thing is I want to do things that are interesting, that I learn from, and that I can, get to a higher plane on, in terms of whatever it is. I don't, whether it's like, how do they put lead in a pencil, or, whatever, it doesn't make a difference. I want to learn things. I'm very intuitive that way. And then the third is to have fun. And so those are the three guiding principles that do that. But inside of that, I've just found, Galen, that if I trust that's inside of me, I'm going to be real. I'm going to be what many people are called, oh, you're so genuine. And with that, I'm also very transparent, because, a lot of people say, hey, fake it till you make it, especially when you see people who are thought leaders, authors and speakers and coaches and celebrities that are in the entertainment field. You fake it till you make it. Well, that's just absolute bullshit. It's hard enough being yourself. Why would you want to be somebody else? And so there's that piece of it. So even if I fall flat on my face, and let's be very clear, I do that all the time. I make mistakes all the time. I yell at people when I shouldn't yell at people. I jump to conclusions to my wife. Where did you put my stuff? Whatever it might be. And I usually am always embarrassed by that. But okay, you got to own that, right? And that's okay to wear that. And so I think it's just important that the more that you're yourself, well, then everybody knows where you're coming from. They know what to expect, right? And then you're more predictable in that manner. But yeah, that's just me. That's how I live my life. It's a lot easier.
I'll tell you, at this moment, I officially became a Jeffrey Hayzlett fan. So this is the moment we can mark that on the calendar.
Thank you.
I'll tell you another person that I've become really fond of over the past several years, and I can see why you two have hit it off, is Ms. Ann McNeil. Ann, come on in because we can take over this conversation easily.
Can?
Look out, stand back.
Listen, I said before the program started that this was going to be one of the best programs, largely because Jeffrey is, again, I'll keep saying this, an excellent example of creative imagination, especially the synthetic, where he's able to take one thing that already exists, combine it with something else that already exists, and create a new product. My question, though, for you, Jeffrey, is what was your first introduction to this book? Because we have a lot of people listening. We're going to continue to share this show, and hopefully you will continue to share the show also. But I think people really want to hear, what was your first experience? Because a lot of people, as we all know, millions all around the world have read this book. For me, when I read it, December 31st, 1979, at 9 p.m., I made a decision. I was tired of being broken, hopeless. And so I just wrote that down, and I will always repeat that. People say, why do you keep saying that? Because I want to remember, and I want to remind all of us, find a date. It doesn't have to be this book, but a date that changes your life when you are introduced to your other self. So when was that period of time for you or situation for you when you were introduced to this book for the very first time?
I was 15 years old. It was 1975. My dad was in the military. He was a senior master sergeant, United States Air Force, 48th Bomber Wing. Spent 3 tours in Nam. So he was gone for years at a time. And up until I was 15, right before I entered high school, we lived in a different city every single year, a different Air Force base. And my parents had just gotten a divorce. I didn't get along with my stepfather. My mother remarried, didn't get along with him at all. Couldn't stand him, for lots of different reasons. And my dad moved back to the state of South Dakota. And I always liked it when we were stationed in South Dakota because it's a beautiful state and they had eagles, and I went hunting and fishing and all those things. And I went back to live with my father, who at that time decided, well, I've been paying your mother $63 a month for child support. Here's your check every month. From now on, you're on your own. And then I found somebody, and my dad got involved with this as well, who started selling Amway. Remember Amway?
I was in Amway.
Amway, LOC, baby.
Yes.
LOC makes the white whiter, the stripier, the blue is bluer, right?
Yes.
And I started selling Amway door to door. That's what I did for a job. And I used to go to all the places where they would bring you together and talk to you, and somebody handed me that book. And then handed me Skip Ross's book. And then handed me Dale Carnegie's book. And then handed me Og Mandino's book. And I was a proficient and just a vivacious reader. And I read anything that got my hands on it. And then I started listening to the records. Yes. Back then, records. Remember that?
And the CD and the cassette tape.
Norman Vincent Peale.
Yes.
And even people and then I started listening to great speakers like Jerry Clower and comedians and all kinds of things. And that's the people that I studied. And then in my 20s, I went to my very first National Speaker Association meeting, I think at 24 or 25, and joined and became a member. And I used to sit there with Skip Ross, with Zig Ziglar and Bill Brooks, Jeannie Robinson. Those were the people I was sitting next to at 25 and 26 and 27 years old and learning. And so I learned from the greatest and learned from and many of the people that, those books that I was reading, I got to meet in my early years, and was just lucky. God blessed me in some way that said that this was the opportunity. But I read those books back then, and then knew something was there. And so part of it was driven by the need to eat.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Because I don't know about you, $63 even back in 1975 wasn't a lot of money. Most people don't even know that story. That's one of the few first times I've ever told that story. And but that's the way my life was. And my dad gave me that money up until I was 18. And then when I was 18, I no longer got that check. But if I hadn't worked, if I hadn't done what I had to do, quite frankly, there were nights I didn't eat, and there were nights that I would spend them in my car, working the night shift at McDonald's, so that I could it was going to be an hour to drive home, and I would stay and so I could go work early that morning. So I'd sleep for 3-4 hours. I did the night shift, and then I'd work the day shift too. So anyway, those were the days.
Well, let me just encourage every person who's listening who is in a type of multi-level marketing business. What Jeffrey has just described is one of the best journeys into entrepreneurship. I was also in Amway, Jeffrey, and I went Emerald in Amway. And so the books, the tapes, the conferences, all of those things, but I did not know that was preparing me for now. So like you said, all the books that they had a book a month. So many of the books that people are reading now, we all read back then. And so that journey for you, and then I'll go to Kodak, because I would contend that helped prepare you to be a success in corporate, and is still preparing you to be more successful in your entrepreneurs. Your thoughts?
Oh, without question. I think the experiences that we have throughout our life, listen, good or bad,
yes.
Help us in everything that we need to do and where we need to go. I wouldn't trade one moment. People say, what would you like to do differently? Or the fact that, somebody hears me on this call, I lived in a different place every single year. Well, my wife went to a one-room schoolhouse in South Dakota up until she was in middle school, and then she went to town school. Okay. Now, to me, and everybody would say, well, Jeff, that's a weird life. You go, what are you talking about? To me, that's normal. For living in one place all your life, that's weird, And so all the things that we do lead us to where we want to do. Don't dwell on whether those were good or bad. They are what they are. What are the things that you can do today based on those experiences of your past that get you where you would like to go? And then once you find where you go, you're going to want to go somewhere else. You're going to want to do it even more, or you're going to want more of it. And so find the things that give you your own conditions of satisfaction. By doing that, by opening up the mind, by having the experiences to have the collective wisdom of the mastermind, the collective wisdom of the collective wisdom of the council, that peer-to-peer council, which we do every single day in the C-Suite Network as part of your business growth, which is also your personal growth, leads to the kind of life that you want to lead. And I think that's an important piece of it.
Now, I would be remiss if I did not ask you to share your thoughts about my books, because I am also learning to self-promote, and we do a lot of things. But I think the power of imagination, which is what you just described in terms of your journey, we want to encourage every single person who's listening. What ideas do you have, like Jeffrey's done, with one idea that built upon another, that now has grown into, but all because he's masterminding with other ideas, with other individuals of like minds and like spirits. And then he came across my books. So of course, before I turn it back over to Galen, I would be remiss if I did not ask you to share.
Well, everybody needs a guideline, a way in which to do it. And so when I was looking, and I called Ann out of the blue, but after I bought her book, but I'll get to that in a second. I'll come back to that. Let me first of all talk about the book. See, sometimes when you're like me and you got that creative side, it's like squirrel. And so you're running over here and you're running over here. That happens to me all the time. So I have to control that squirrel. Okay. I got to put a leash on him and take him for a walk. So when I talk about the book, I was looking for something. I said, there's got to be a process, a way, something. This is good, but what can we do to get a process, a way to be able to implement a mastermind? Who's got that? And then I found Ann's book. And so what a wonderful way to be able to give us some easy steps on how to then implement. And of course, the work that she's done with the MasterMind, International MasterMind Association, in terms of bringing people together to help them get the power of the collective of the things that they can do for themselves. And of course, I've been looking for things to do with folks at a business level. So how can you do this, and how can you create it, and how can you build something? So we're actually creating the MasterMind Council inside the C-Suite Network, which is nothing but a mastermind of masterminds. It is for anyone that's running a mastermind council. That is running their own mastermind. We're going to bring them together. And I'm going to be doing, and as well, if you don't mind me mentioning this, on
Absolutely.
May 27th, I am actually going to be putting together a webinar on how to run a mastermind. How to do it, how to run your own yourself. And so I'd love to have anyone that would love to come. We don't charge anything. Please come, share. That's what it's all about. And if we can find ways to do business together, fantastic. If we can't, it's still going to be a high-powered, really high-powered kind of look at, hey, here's a mastermind. Here's how you look at it. Here's how you look at thought and everything else. And so anyway, I was just so excited by that. And then to be able to get with Ann, I actually called Ann afterwards and said, tell me what you're doing with the association. Tell me how you're doing this. Tell me. And then I found out that she's doing these Saturday mornings. Tell me more about that. Because again, it gave me the ability to go learn more about what others were doing and how they were doing it. And then of course, well, look at this. Here I am months later, and I get invited to this wonderful Saturday morning.
Awesome. We want to, thank you for that. Galen, back to you.
Yeah, so this has been an incredible conversation already. Miss Ann, I would love for you to come back on and just talk just a little bit about this annual conference that we have.
Absolutely. Yes. I was sharing with Jeffrey, and we're going to be collaborating on some things, because what we're building, which is intentionally congruent with what C-Suite is doing. Let me say that again, so everybody who's listening understand the strategic partnerships. And Nido Qubein calls it intentional intelligence. What we're doing is we're building a place for groups to be held accountable. And we host an annual meeting for your life. And we're going to extend an invitation to you, Jeffrey, to join us this year in January on the 7th and 8th. This is not for C-Suite, Jeffrey. This is for Jeffrey's life.
You bet.
Your spiritual life, your family goals, your health goals. You know, that exam that men don't like to take, make sure anyway, your educational goals, your personal development goals, your businesses, the goals for those, your recreational, your civic, your creativity, and all of the different goals that each of us are expected to set, but in every area of your life for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And right now I'm in my 40th year on the plan I wrote 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10, and we review that and we update it every single year at this event. And you are expected to bring your life in writing. We have children all ages who are also masterminding with us every single Sunday for 30 minutes. Yes, children, all ages. Yes. As soon as they can read, from 4 all the way up to 21. Yes. And so this is what we do. We're going to invite you to please click the link or go to internationalmasterminders.com and join us in January at the Embassy Suites on the 7th and 8th, 2021. And we will see you there. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. And, I would just love to go around and just ask everyone to kind of check in with their ahas, because this has been an incredible conversation that easily could have been 2 hours, very, very easily, without any effort at all. So I'll start with you, Dr. Peter. What are some key ahas that you got from this conversation, and how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, first of all, so much has been coming through the chat, through Facebook Live and through YouTube. Galen, I can't even keep up. Just some phenomenal comments, phenomenal feedback relative to what Jeffrey's talking about. I'm loving this conversation. Some of the things that have resonated with me mostly was the vulnerability needed for growth. That's huge, right? How are you able to open yourself up to be more transparent, so that you can grow more as well. That mastermind power is so powerful. And if you have not perused through chapter 9 of this great text, or if you have not experienced a mastermind, we definitely have some examples for you to do so. My name is Dr. Peter A. James, the high performance coach, helping you to shift your mindset. You can find me on any social media platform at Dr. Peter A. James. That's at DrPeterAJames. Excited to be here with you all. Jeffrey, great show. Back to you, Galen.
Well, fantastic. This, again, amazing show. Ms. Ann, let's go to you. Key ahas, key takeaway from this conversation. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, my key takeaway is Jeffrey's real story on how it all began. I think that any and everybody listening to that can better appreciate your own story. One of my favorite books is Acres of Diamonds, and the fact that Russell Conwell talk about, your greatest diamond mine is inside of yourself, and it's normally in your hometown. And what Jeffrey's done for me today is to continue to remind me that everybody has a story. And when you've read this book and you continue to read this book, allow it to read you. And so, Jeffrey, I'm going to say on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for sharing. But for all of those of you who are listening, connect with C-Suite, connect with us. You can connect with me at annmcneil.com, but only if you are interested in having a better quality of life in every area of your life and you're willing to invest in yourself. Thank you.
All right. Well, Jeffrey, this has been an incredible conversation. You have definitely delivered against everything that we had hoped for. What are some key takeaways that you may have walked away with? And how can people get a hold of you if they want to get more involved with the C-Suite Network or some of the other projects that you're working on?
Oh, thank you very much for asking. I'm going to go back to chapter 4 of the book, The Power of Autosuggestion. We sometimes forget about reflection, and I hadn't spent a lot of time doing reflection in terms of what impacts me. I don't think about those things, don't get involved much. I'm kind of more of a forward thinking kind of person, but when I take the time to reflect about the things that happen in my life and the way they shape me, and the fact that, quite frankly, we can all choose in our life. We all have things in our lives that could make us think that we should be a victim rather than empower ourselves in what we want to do. And so luckily enough, I never had time to think about that. But I also had a great power of autosuggestion. And a lot of people might call it meditating today, might think about, planning positive thoughts and the way in which you do things. I do a process of centering. I spent a lot of time in Japan. And a lot of ways in which we kind of come to some peace in a position of strength. And I think we all need that. And, my wife is probably the best at that than I could ever be. Every morning she says, it's going to be a great day. And when I start getting down, because I can get down just like anybody else, she just brings me back up. And it's that power of autosuggestion. And so I was reminded of that today. And even the power of reflection on the things that got us where we are and to be grateful for those things. That's the takeaway I had today, because I hadn't told that story in a long, long time. And I'm grateful for those things. I'm grateful for those trials and challenges, because they set me up for the rest of my life and the way that I want to be. And so you have to be grateful for even the negative things that happen in your life. And to me, that was important. Hey, to find me, all you got to do is go to C-Suite, SUITE network.com. You can find me at Jeff at C-Suite-network.com. Jeffrey Hayzlett, you can find me, just go look. But if you look up anything C-Suite, and we'd love to have you. Again, going to be doing a mastermind session on May the 27th. Love to have you. We've got lots of great programs that are going on in the C-Suite. We do over 300 live programs a year now, and we'd love to have you. We have over 350,000 people who are active in the C-Suite network. And then on top of that, we've got our podcasting C-Suite. If you want to be a podcaster, if you want to do a TV show, you want to be on a show, whatever it is, we'd love to have you come by and see us in the C-Suite.
Well, fantastic. Well, again, we do this every week, but this has been one of the best and most informative shows that I can recall. I assign that back to our guests. I hope you guys have gotten a lot from this. I would love to do a couple of things. Number one, I'd love to share with you some an insight, a takeaway that I was reminded of from this conversation, and that is actually something taken from my very own book that's endorsed by the C-Suite Network Book Club. So definitely get connected. But the insight is that all leaders will be tested. Those who pass the test have a very clear sense of their values before they take the test. And I think Jeffrey has definitely demonstrated that. You see how he has leveraged in his imagination to grow from those three principles that he has always held dear and held important to his life. So that's the power of this information. That's the power of this book. My name is Galen Bingham. I'm the leadership strategist, and you can get a hold of me by going to www.killglobalcoaching.com. That's how you can get a hold of me. One of the things that I would really love everyone to connect with is I've got a brand new podcast that we're having a whole lot of fun with, called Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. That's real talk that you can't find anywhere else. We have new episodes every Tuesday, and we talk to people like Jeffrey Hayzlett that talk about what it really takes to be successful in life and in business, and would love to have you join. But this has been a great conversation. Jeffrey, you have really brought to life what this book is about, what this philosophy is about. And next week, we're going to have another amazing guest. So I hope that you will join us at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday. We're going to be talking to Jana Dutton again on imagination. This is an incredibly important, incredibly igniting chapter. And so we're going to stay with it and have this conversation with Jana as we continue to go through all of the principles of Think and Grow Rich. So with that, I want to bid you a good evening, a good afternoon. I think we're not even into the morning yet, through the morning yet. Until next time, this is Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist, hoping that you will think and grow rich. Until next time, take care.